Welcome to the View from the Inside podcast. I'm Kevin Richardson, president of Tactical Wealth Management and the host of the View from the Inside, episode number 16 for us. And we're into tax season, right? April 15th, your taxes are due. So again, make sure if you're a client, you're collecting those 1099s, getting your tax paperwork put together to go give it to your tax professional. And also remember, you can do IRA contributions right up until April 15th. Also, SEP contributions can be made up until April 15th. So be sure to reach out if we haven't contacted you already, or if you're listening to this and you're not a client of ours, make sure you can take advantage of that. Want to welcome the guest that we've got for episode number 16. I'm fired up. Again, the people that I get to meet through my day job as a financial advisor and through athletics, it's just so much fun. And Charles Arbuckle, he's our guest. To me, he's the two-time All-American tight end at UCLA. Right now, he's the National Biz Director for Amplity Health. You've probably seen him on radio, or you've seen him on TV, rather, heard him on radio. He does a lot of broadcasting, both college and pro football. And Charles, first off, man, you're down there in North Carolina. Those storms are blowing through. I hope you guys are staying warm, and thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. Just real good. Luckily, that last one that came through didn't hit us too badly. But, having lived in Indy for 12 years and being used to a little bit gray weather, we don't get that as much in the Carolinas. It came through, and then I think we have another one coming this weekend. So,
Yeah.
We get all 4 seasons. They're going to make sure we get all of them this year.
Now, any shoveling of the driveway going on in the Carolinas right now? Or is it just cold?
Not right now. It's clear. It's cold, but it's clear. And I think we're supposed to get about 4 or 6 inches this weekend, but who knows?
Right,
The
right.
weatherman he's not always accurate.
Well, we'll sit out here in California with the sun coming through the window here, and that's our only problem we've got right now weather-wise. Well, first off, let's jump right in. I always love doing the origin story. And as I said, for me, Charles Arbuckle is this awesome tight end that plays at UCLA. Same era that I played at Stanford. We played against each other. And I got a couple stories around that, that's for sure. But give me your origin story. You're a, Woodridge High School guy out of Houston.
Yeah.
There's some great athletes that came out of that high school during your era. Talk about that, and how did you end up in Southern California playing for the Bruins?
Yeah, it's Willow Ridge, and, it's in Fort Bend County, Missouri City. And, the guys that kind of came before me, most people will remember Thurman Thomas because he was a Hall of Famer.
Oh, right, yeah.
We had a lot of other guys, too, that were really good that kind of set the impetus for me. Guys that played at the college level, Moses Horn, and just as I think back, there were just so many great athletes that had kind of come out of there. Rodney Brown was a quarterback on those state championship teams. But I think what it did is it set me up to understand, hey, this is an opportunity. I was more of a basketball guy. I love basketball. I love football.
Okay.
I liked football, but baseball was also my sport. And once I started really playing football and getting into it, I thought there was a chance because I saw the guys in front of me. O.J. Brigance was behind. Well, we were on the same team, had played football since we were in Pop Warner. So what ended up happening is in our area, whether you went to Willow Ridge or Madison, or then Yates was one of the big schools, we all kind of played ball together. And it goes back to like the South Main Mustangs. Right. On my team, I think there was, myself, Reggie Moore, who played in the league. He played with me at UCLA.
Right. Yeah.
Levin Jones played basketball over Seas. He played at Baylor. Lance Blanks played basketball at the University of Texas. He was in that little league organization. Ended up going to University of Texas. His dad was Sid Blanks.
Right.
So Reggie's dad, Sid, a bunch of other guys. O.J. Brigance was like a year behind us, but he played. It probably was. It's too many to count, but when I look back and I started counting some of the guys that ended up playing, it was like 10 of us that either played at a high level in college or made it to the pros. And then, oh, by the way, you have Broderick Thomas, who played with the Steers, I think. And he ended up playing. So it was one of those things where we had these really good coaches and guys set you up for success. And I played all three sports. So it was natural that basketball was my thing, but football became it because as a tight end, that's really what you're doing in basketball.
Yeah, for sure. And you answered kind of one of my questions there in this world that we've created with high
Yeah.
school sports and college sports and everybody's focused on one sport. You were a three-sport guy. My hunch is there were a few football recruiters that made it to your basketball games to see how you moved on the court, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking about that with one of my former teammates in high school. I said the reason I knew UCLA and some of the other schools were really good recruiters is because they watched me in football, but they came to the other sports.
Yeah.
I knew they were there. They would show up at basketball games and at practice. So they wanted to see how you could play. And it's hard for kids now with all the things they have to do to play just three sports, but you should at least play two. And
Right.
it burns me with these coaches that say, well, no, you have to focus only on mine. And I don't believe that. I don't think that's fair to the kids, and I don't think that's fair to their athletic development. But I also think it's a high school coach or a middle school coach even that thinks his records are better than what you should be doing. And ultimately, they're going to use your name if you ever make it anywhere anyway. So
Right.
that's the biggest problem that I have with high school sports now as I look at it and kind of watch how coaches operate with high school players.
Yeah, and you talk about your coach at UCLA, the great Terry Donahue, winningest coach in UCLA history, if memory serves me correct. I remember him being in the gym at Shafter High School where I went, because a kid a year ahead of me was being recruited, and he came to watch. Let me see how this kid moves on a basketball court. And I
Yeah.
remember just thinking, like, wow, here's a chance to impress. Let me see here. My only story about playing directly against you is the ultimate compliment for you. Back in that era, they were starting to figure out how to use these tight ends
Yeah.
effectively, right?
Yeah.
And the favorite route was just a stick route. You would just post up like a basketball player on
Yeah.
a smaller inside linebacker. See the guy on the other end of the mic here. And Troy Aikman zips that stick route into you.
Yeah.
I'm sitting right on it, and I remember coming up behind you thinking, I'm going to punch this ball out and
Yeah.
make the play of my life down here in the Rose Bowl. And I punched that ball, and I thought that my arm had broken in half. And I'm hanging on with my left arm, and you're just dragging me like the towel you were wearing.
Yeah.
And I'm just hoping like Brad Humphreys from up top comes over and knocks you down. Finally, we get you to the ground after about a 12-yard gain. But anyhow, that was my introduction to – I remember I had a coach would always talk about those guys that are NFL bodies, right?
Mhm.
This is an NFL dude. And I remember like getting up going, that totally makes sense to me right now. That was an NFL dude right there. Not only throwing the ball, but the guy catching the ball. Talk about playing down there with Troy Aikman. Obviously had spectacular success in the NFL. And then touch on Coach Donahue, because that's a guy that they've struggled to replicate what he accomplished at one of the greatest schools, I think, in the country.
Bob Toledo, I thought, did a pretty good job because he got him really, really close. And that's probably the last time they've been in that position. Mora had some things going. But I think the big thing for me was, I got recruited by Stanford. And one of the things that they talked a lot about, Coach Elway was the coach actually when I was getting recruited, and he wanted to use a tight end. That was the good thing about when I was coming out was most of the schools I looked at were tight end friendly.
Okay.
And so, Stanford was one that I looked at. And I think the reason why I held onto the ball so well is I think the year before I may have fumbled at y'all's place. I can't remember.
That's right.
I have a pretty long memory for making when I don't play well. But what it was for me is I went out to UCLA. I'd had family, the natural migration for African Americans was from Louisiana and Texas out to the West Coast. A lot of my family was in Southern California, Pasadena in particular, but other places, and then also Northern California. So, for me to leave Texas wasn't going to be a huge deal. They weren't all super close family, but they were close enough that I had visited as a child and went out to LA quite a few times. And so in 7th grade, I got a chance to play in the AAU tournament at UCLA.
Okay.
And, I just kind of fell in love with the place.
Yeah.
It's hard when you see all the pretty girls and sunshine and everything else, but it was just, it felt like, just like, hey, this could be it. And so when I started getting recruited, that was my first visit. And Coach Donahue came to my house, and kind of just told me, hey, we got a chance to be really good, and we need a tight end like you. And we're recruiting a couple other guys. Corin Anthony was one, and Randy Austin. He said, but we really need the tight end position in our offense. And Homer Smith was there, and then we had Steve Axman. So that was the easy part for me. Once I went to the other places, I liked Stanford, I liked Notre Dame, LSU. I was going to go to Miami, and then that last week I just said, you know what, I think I'm done. I'm ready to sign, and ended up going to UCLA. But the beautiful thing was Troy, during that process, had gotten hurt the year that they won the national championship. So Jamel Holloway comes in, a California kid, comes in and takes his job after he breaks his leg. We see Troy, Reggie and I see him throwing on the intramural field.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he's working with Rick Neuheisel, who became, but back then Rick was like an assistant coach. He was a volunteer coach, I think, at the time. So he's working with Troy, and they were just he was throwing to some, equipment managers.
Okay.
And Kevin, I'm going to tell you, man, it was like God had answered our prayer. Not that we didn't, Matt Stevens was a really good quarterback. We had other guys, Tommy Maddox came in. So we had guys that could play.
Yeah.
But it's different when you have a 3-time Super Bowl guy, a Hall of Famer. And right away when Homer left, because Homer wanted to use a tight end, and my freshman year, I had one catch for like 7 yards. My sophomore year, we started just really, he said, hey, I'm going to use you. Sometimes if you get tired, make sure we're going to run 2 tights. We'll split you out. So it was like, I was in heaven. And to have Troy back there with whether it was stick or we call the Y option, I knew him, he knew me, and we got on a tear there, just 6-7 catches a game and just really starting to do well. So I couldn't have asked for a better quarterback to have in college, and then to watch him and see his success in the pros. But it was good to play a role in him getting to that next level, because we had some really good times at UCLA.
Yeah, I remember thinking we were playing against Troy Aikman going, yes, this is a dude. Yeah, right. It was just that ball came out quick, tight, and just put it, that term they say, put it right on you. That's what he did, right?
And I think Michael Irvin always talks about it, but it was a very catchable ball.
Yes.
And Troy would put, like what you said, I could turn, and if you're on my inside shoulder, the ball's going to hit me here.
Yeah.
If I missed it, my bad. Because he knew where the guy was. The deep ball was just for him, even in college, his attention to detail, and he was a perfectionist. We know now how rooted he was in having things done a certain way. But I can understand, having played with him and been around him, that made all of us better, and it elevated your game. And I played with some quarterbacks that could be a little bit buttholes if they didn't throw the ball properly and try to call you out.
Right.
Never had that problem with Troy. You kind of felt bad when you didn't catch the ball, because he generally put it in a place where it wasn't going to get you killed. I might have remembered one time in our whole time together where he laid me out, and he was like, Bub, my bad. All right, as long as you know, don't do that again. He said, no, I got you. And it's one of those things that if you have a quarterback that can put it on you like that, man, it's a beautiful sheet of music.
Yeah, it really is. And the infamous hospital ball. Yeah, right. Back then, defenders would lead with the head, and if they put you high across the middle, it was not a fun thing. If you're
every team in the Pac-10 at that time had a headhunter. I can't remember y'all's, but we had either Chuck Cecil, or it was just pick your poison. Guys, the kids over at SC, whether it was Cleveland Coulter and Mark Carrier. Every year every game, every week you're playing some dude looking to take your head off. So I was determined not to be that guy. And I think Troy put me in some good positions where I only had one shot. And I think it was Rory Diary at Oregon. He and Chris, I can't remember Chris's last name, Chris Oldham. But Rory just talked the whole time. And he hit me so hard one time in my back after I caught the ball. I couldn't breathe. I went to the sideline, but I was so mad because I wanted to get it. And I got up right away and I couldn't say anything, ran to the sideline. But when I came back in, I tried to run him over the next time I caught the ball.
And of course, if I remember correctly, it was a great era for the face mask. You had the full cage minus the bar right up by your eyes. That was just the best look in the world right there.
Huge shoulder pads. Yeah, we did. We had interesting gear back then.
Yeah, it was played with the helmet back then. That's for sure. Well, quickly, because I know we're on a timeline here. Your pro career, 1990, you get drafted. I think it was 5th round. You go to New Orleans. You spend some time with the Browns, Chargers, Packers, but ultimately it was the Colts.
Yeah.
That you played with. Old teammate of mine, Alan Grant. He was an Indianapolis Colt with you. One of the greatest guys you'll ever meet. That's for sure. Talk about that NFL thing. How different it was in the 90s versus what it is now. Because I know you do a lot of pro football work with your broadcasting.
Yeah, it was. And Alan and I. It's funny. We missed each other probably by a year. So we played against each other, but he was leaving as I was coming in. So I just missed him. But I think the one thing that was good about that time was just, we were in the same conference, the AFC. So I was drafted by the Saints, was there a year, had a cup of coffee with a couple other teams and was in camp with a few others, but I stuck with the Colts. And we got an opportunity to be in the same division as the Buffalo Bills, and Miami was good as well. New England and us, we were that's where we struggled. But the Buffalo Bills, they were going to 4 straight Super Bowls, and the first one they should have beat the Giants. That probably would have given them that, at least that one that they've been still looking for. But man, it was great because a lot of the Buffalo Bills guys, Thurman was there, one of my high school guys that was Marcus Patton, who I had played against every week, Matt Darby. They had a bunch of Mike Lotus. So the Bills had a lot of guys from UCLA. And it was good to play them a couple times a year, even though they would kind of beat us. In 92, we ended up beating them at home after they throttled us at their place. One of the few times I think in that era, because they were so good. Yeah. But we ended up upsetting them and missed the playoffs that year by 1 game. We got hot late in the year, just couldn't make it to the playoffs. But what I remember about that is just that era and playing, some great games down in Miami. Dan Marino, who was, you talk about a guy that could spin the ball. We had, him, Jim Kelly, Jeff George was our guy, and then he ended up getting traded. But there was some really good football that was being played in that AFC East, and it was very, very, very competitive.
Yeah, that Jeff George, will just say a little bit about quarterbacks. I always thought that was the most underrated arm in football. That guy could really snap the ball, correct?
He could. And the problem for Jeff was he got some bad habits early in his career. He played with Ron Meyer, who probably didn't demand enough of him. Played with Eric Dickerson, who was, almost a Hall of Fame running back by that time. So Jeff kind of thought, I would say if he looked back and have, we've had a few conversations about it, he probably needed a different kind of organization and coach early in his career. Got beat up too. He got sacked. But I'm gonna tell you, in practice, there were times the ball wouldn't hit the ground, and he could fit it in some spaces now. And still, when he got, I think the best thing for him is when he got to Atlanta. Remember, he had June Jones.
Oh, right,
He was on a tear late in his career because he could flat out spin the ball. There were some guys I played with or saw live. He was one of them that. When he was going, it was hard to stop him.
Well, last question before we let you go. You played for a lot of coaches, Pee Wee football, high school, college, pros. Probably it was some great coaches. We established that. Some probably not so good coaches. That's just how coaching works. But what's the best piece of advice you got from any coach that you ever played for?
It may be from multiple coaches because it all kind of each coach has his own style, right? I mean,
Right.
Ted Marchibroda, who I played with the Colts, was great. I love playing with Ted, the old school guy, fiery, didn't cuss a whole lot, but he did a few times if we got on the wrong side of him.
Right.
But just really good understanding the history of the game and a good offensive mind. So he was one. Terry Donahue, who recruited me, I can't say enough about Coach Donahue and the things that he did for our organization and just understanding how to play the game. He had great coaches on his staff, which was one thing. And then he also knew the game very well. And he was a former boxer. So kind of had a mean streak in him. And then, Coach Pierce, who I played with in high school, but Gary Nichols was the guy that started kind of getting me in the right direction of how do you work everybody? How do you get people how do you always show up every single time? And each one of these coaches that I'm talking about, that was basically the same thing. I mean, I tell my team now, just something that kind of encapsulates everything that they shared in some way, shape, or form. Out compete, out hustle, and outperform the competition. If you can do those things every day, scoreboard is going to usually ring right. And it just, when you have really good coaches that understand how to tap into you give that back twofold or tenfold rather. So that's kind of been the mantra for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I lied. One last question before we let you go. We're recording this on January 29th. Super Bowl next week. Give me your prediction there. Seahawks, Patriots.
Yeah, it's hard to cheer for the Patriots being an AFC East guy. But I will say this: Alonzo Highsmith, who is in their organization, his wife passed away suddenly before the season, and Alonzo is on their staff. So I even sent him a text and said, I don't cheer for the Patriots, but I like you, I like Drake May, and I like Vrabel. So if you guys win, I won't be upset. And he laughed. Yeah. But I do think this Seattle team, their defense reminds me of the Legion of Boom. They call themselves something else now. Yeah. And I got to see them live a few weeks ago when I called the Colts Seahawks game. I'll tell you this too, Sam Darnold and Jackson Smith and Jigba, their combination and how they play and then getting the ball to the tight end. The one thing that I hope doesn't hurt Seattle is not having Zach Charbonnet. That 1-2 punch at running back to me was really strong. But I think that's the one thing that if it hurts them, it would be that, because New England is not going to, it's funny. Even like when they were winning all those Super Bowls, they didn't generally blow people out. They just found ways to win. And I think Vrabel has something going with that team. So I won't be disappointed if the Patriots win, but I think the Seahawks are going to win this one. I really do.
Well, everybody's heard it here first. Right on. Well, Charles, thanks so much for your time. And want to thank the listeners for tuning in. Best thing you can do, give us a follow and share this podcast. If you've got a financial question, give us a call, 831-717-1144. Shoot us an email at krichardson@tacwealth.com. On behalf of Charles, our producer, Bill Tucker, and the good people at Proudmouth, thanks for tuning in, and so long until next time.
Thank you for listening to the View from the Inside podcast with Kevin Richardson. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. To ask questions about topics covered during the show, head over to www.tacwealth.com. And don't forget to check the show notes for additional contact information. Kevin Richardson is a registered representative with and securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards Center for Financial Planning Incorporated owns and licenses the certification marks CFP, Certified Financial Planner, and CFP with plaque design in the United States to Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards Incorporated, which authorizes individuals who successfully complete the organization's initial and ongoing certification requirements to use the certification marks.